No, you don't necessarily understand. No. Yes, but then at least you have the pleasant problem of deciding exactly how you're going to handle it. Are you going to handle it that the doctor that didn't know that he had depression or schizophrenia will now be told he has it? Or if the original doctor being responsible for the diagnosis will get the message about it and will be asked to handle it in his stead. Or you will get the thing where you can ask the patient, hey, something is going on that I don't know. Will you allow me to look at it? But that is then an ethical and political decision. But at least you have the mechanism. Today you don't have the mechanism. If you hide it today, you're done for. Also, a lot of psychiatric medication in particular is very sensitive to other diseases and other medication. Right? They're horrible in that way. And that means that if the whole thing with psychiatry is kept confidential, including the medication, right? Which can happen today too, and I write something that collides with it, I won't know. Patient won't know until something happens to him. But with this system, it could already say, look, there are contraindications for what you're doing now, except I can't tell you what they are. Which is fantastic, because you can't do that today. And then you can decide politically or ethically how you go on that. But the system can tell you. Something else, which is a very frequent problem in medicine and that no system solves today, is if a contraindication develops after the fact. You give somebody a medication, and slowly over time the liver packs in, or the kidney, or whatever, or the heart gets weird. They've been taking this pill for like 20 years. Nobody thinks about it, and all of a sudden they're dead, or almost, because of an overdoses or undesired interaction between this old medication and this new organ failure. It's very hard to track, because everybody assumes humanly when you see a patient, if I don't do anything, everything will keep being the same, but it's not true. Because when this liver fails, you actually need to go back and check these medications if something needs to be removed or changed. This system would detect that, because it doesn't matter if you have the medication first or the issue first. If you add an issue, liver failure, then it will automatically easily say, yeah, but we have a few problems here in your medication list with liver failure. Right? Even medication you don't see because they're confidential, it will say, hey, you need to talk to someone, right? Because you're going to get the problem here. That's impossible today. And I'm sure, 80% sure, I've never tested it, but that these are the things that kill patients, not the stupid interactions. The contraindications, both when you prescribe the medicine and when something develops afterwards that make an earlier medication a problem. Huh? Again, it's the entity disease is missing from the records. It's the missing element. It's the big hole in the center there. Why is there no such thing? Dosage tables, I already told you that. Now, interestingly, when we're talking about this at orthopedics, we had another few ramifications of the system. And one of them is orthopedicians are very interested in stuff like, fractures, but also in back pain. They have studies going on, how do you treat back pain most efficiently? But they have one huge problem, is the selection of patients they see is so small, because 95% or something of all the patients with back pains never show up at an orthopedician. They are cured by physiotherapy. Some of them show up, even though they're not necessarily the worst, but there is selection and they get treated and so forth. The studies are worthless. But if you have a system over a province using this, the guidelines are often composed then by the specialist, by the orthopedician, saying the back pain should be treated by the general practitioner for that, that, and that, and that, and if it exceeds these limits, it should be sent to us. But interestingly, the orthopedicians can at that point actually know how many patients out at the general practices are being treated for back pain using their guidelines, which means that they actually see the patients they haven't seen yet. they see the whole population simply because the guidelines that they have made are activated for a number of patients. Which still should not lead us into anecdotal automated medicine, but it will be a very interesting warning that they say, okay, this problem is on the rise. We can expect more patients of that kind within this period. They can actually see which patients they are going to get. So it's another element that fell out of it. Now, in practice, the way we're going to do this is not replace electronic healthcare records, because that's, a lost cause. But instead, this is intended to be on top of it. So this is the physician's interface to the electronic healthcare records. While the issues, these whole guidelines, will be kept separate, because the record systems we have today can't handle it. They don't have the database for it. They don't have the elements. But that doesn't matter. You can keep it separately. But these records that are produced go out as textual records to the old system. So they don't lose anything. You still have it because the law says you have to have it. And some people don't have this, and they look at the old records, they don't see much difference. Also, on the bottom, I'm going to do the thing that you can look at the old records, get at lab reports, and all that thing. So it's on top of the systems. And already 2 of them have expressed large interest in doing this as an extra on top of their, actually themselves, and have the interconnections. Yeah.
One extra application?
No, it's not one. It's instead of. I've shown this to doctors, and they say yes. This is the doctor's interface instead of what he's having to do. And everyone I talked to.
For the doctors, it's replacing, but not generally.
It's a shell on top of the current system. And this is what the doctor would use instead of the current system. But everyone else would use the current system. And the whole thing with the lab and everything, that's from the current system, but connected to this. Now, if you ask what doctors think about it, everyone I showed this to who talked about this said, they can't wait until they get to try it. Because this is what most people have been looking for. Yeah. And it's not another system. Quite the opposite. This is just it. You don't have to use 3 systems to get something done.
So similar to them, to what they have been used to. It's like it's such a familiar environment.
Yeah, because you would start out here, in principle. And as soon as you have any idea of a diagnosis, you add that, and you go on there, and you use them both at the same time. So it's, and it's touch, of course, and it's an iPad, and, sexy stuff. And the other interesting part is, if you look at, there's another concept difference. If you look at today, it's very text intensive, the electronic healthcare record. You sit there, if you write it yourself, you type like crazy. Eh? Otherwise you dictate because, doctors can't type, however that is possible. I don't know why, but that's that idea. Look at this system, all of a sudden there's very little text to do because you have guidelines. And the guidelines are more or less you check off, you add something, you write, and you click something and so forth, which means it's much more suitable for a touch platform than what a classical record is. This needs touch, right? Very easy. What I was also going to do here is that if you touch a little red blob here, you can speak to it instead. Then it goes to secretary that writes it out, or to speech to text. Right? This is very easy because if you do that, you don't have to say this is doctor this for the patient that and so forth, because the system knows all that. Just your little your speech of 5 seconds, like, oh, he's pretty good. Right? That's all that goes to the secretary because she just gets a form, she hears, oh, that's good, she writes, oh, that's good, that's all. System pops it back in here, it could be there 10 seconds later. Also interesting, it could go out to the cheapest secretary in the world if you want to have an auction system behind it. Right? Which means that you don't have to type on this thing if you don't want to, you can speak. Right? But most of it is touch. Which means that actually we're compensating for the lack of the disease concept and the guideline in current systems by replacing it with a lot of text. Which in turn gives everybody the reason to say, well, it should be standard terms so we can read the text, but instead of working around all these problems, actually identify the missing element, and the missing element is the disease. or the issue as I call it. That's the problem, that's the entity that is missing. And it's not because it's always been like this that it's correct. Haven't I gone over time? I can go on for as long as you, forever. But any questions about this? Or does everyone want to go home?
How about a condition where there is no guidelines?
Yeah, well, I think first of all that's why I added this thing with free text, so you can always write. But even not having, because if you have in emergency care, they introduced in Uppsala, they introduced a system for the nursing where every patient that comes in gets a guideline right from the start. Has nothing to do with this. It's like nursing procedures, and they have 53 different cases, I think, and they have 5 degrees from serious to mild for all of these. So as soon as the patient comes in, they assign, and then as soon as they know more, they change. But they always have a procedure. But the first procedure is ABC, right? Airway, breathing, cardiac, and so. So they have a procedure saying, in effect, I have no idea what's going on. But that is already a procedure. Here's the same thing. I think you could easily have that. For every patient that comes in, ask them why they're there so you don't mistake them for the postman. Right? Then we usually have the basics like heart, pulmonary, and so forth. As soon as you know more, you drag in something else and you pop it out again. We have to get away from, I said that everything is right only. That does not mean that the interface is like that. Right? The interface should be here, that if I want to take something out, I just out. Right? So it's easy to work with. Somewhere in the background, there is a registration of everything you did that you can pick out if there's ever a discussion or you're getting sued or whatever, but you shouldn't see it. Right? What you should see is what you want to see now, not the whole history of everything. Not like once I introduced hypertension, I can never get rid of the guideline anymore. Not like that. Yeah, you can drop it. Right? If you change your mind, drop it. Right? The guidelines that are so-called, and here we get the problem again, what are you going to do with finished problems? Well, first of all, are they ever finished? That's the first thing. Secondly, I was just thinking of letting them slide down. Right? Maybe if they're not really yours or not really that much, you could just mark them as, show them, not at all or very far down, very weakly or whatever. It's your preference. Right? That doesn't make that the problem is disappeared. Right? But that I think are things that will be discovered in user interface, which I think is important. Otherwise I wouldn't have taken an iPad for this. Yeah. Okay. Nothing else? In that case, thank you. And the papers are on your intranet somewhere. Okay. Thank you. Bye.